This morning, we will be turning to Acts chapter 21. That was Acts chapter 21. As I was prepping for Sunday school the past week or two, this is not what I originally had intended to go into, but what do my intentions really matter? So we're going to be spending a few weeks looking at the life of Paul. So if you will, this will be a couple weeks of character study and development. This is just something that has been heavy on me, and all my free time studying has been looking at the chronology in the various missionary trips and how it all fits together. So we will be looking at a character study of Paul over the next few weeks, and the title for this morning is The Measuring of Saul. And so reading from Acts 21, starting at verse 35, and it says, "And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people." And I apologize, let me set the stage. This is when Paul had returned to Jerusalem, where he had been warned, don't go back there, this is not good for you. So he was in the temple, and he was speaking of the revelation of God. And they say, go get him, we're going to have a conversation with him. So he's going before the chiefs of Israel. And as he's on the stairs, he was born of the soldiers, for the multitude of the people followed after him, crying, away with him. And Paul was to be led into the castle. He said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek? Art thou not that Egyptian which before these days madest an uproar and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? So it sounds like the chief captain here was a little misled on who he was dragging where, because he's saying, oh, you're the Egyptian that made people leave, and it wasn't. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. When there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, Men, brethren, and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they heard that he spoke in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence, and he saith, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Sicilia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. And I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. Brother Readout, will you pray for our lesson this morning, and that God unties my tongue this morning, because I seem to have difficulty speaking this morning. Amen. Thank you, and you may be seated. I do have two other texts that I will be drawing upon, but I figured have mercy upon you so that you may be seated while we go through it. And we'll be referencing these multiple times as we go through a timeline and some of the history of Saul. And I know we are reading Paul, but before I get into these things, I think it's important to understand that Paul is talking at roughly 58 AD is when he went back to Jerusalem. And so there's some back and forth, and I will say this, there was no stone that writ down that said, as of this date, December 14th of 2025, Paul was here. So I ask for your liberty. If you disagree by a year or two, I'm going by my best studies, which may prove to be short-fallen, but at least it gives us a reference of time. So as Paul is going back and we start looking at his life when he was Saul, we are dealing with someone who has matured and spent time in the spent time in the Word, and is reflecting upon what he once was. And the things that we go over is not him bragging about the positions that Saul had gained. It's not him bragging about what he had done, but he is stating fact. If I was to liken it to my own self, I have talked about some of the things that have occurred in my childhood that are not the best, that are not the most favorable. And I joke about it because, unfortunately, a dark sense of humor is how I've learned to cope with things. I don't bring it up as an accusation or to hurl it at anybody who may have been involved, but it is facts of my life that help shape who I am today. And so when Paul is talking about what shaped him, he is not bragging about what he was, but he is just being factual about who he was at the time that the Lord delivered him from. It is okay for us to recognize what we once were, to the glory of God to reveal his strength in our life of what he has brought us out of. There is last time we had the consolidated service with Windsor Locks, Brother Rick preached on, and this has been something that's been on my mind, is the circumstances that you have gone through in your life will allow you to reach people who have gone through the same that you may not understand and reach people who haven't. Meaning, sometimes having shared experiences will draw people together so that you can have discussions upon it. Because when you are trapped in a pit and you want to get out of the pit, you want someone who's been in a pit who got out of that pit. I don't want to hear about somebody who was locked in their car if I was in a pit. It does not compute. But if someone has been in a pit and says, look, there was no way out except for the Lord Jesus Christ, then that is a frame of reference that can be identified with. And so the reason I say that is sometimes we want to complain about the fairness or the unfairness of the life that we have gone through and not realizing that God's hand is in everything. All authority is his. Yes, man has sinned, man has fallen, and we deal with our consequences. But it does say all things work together for good to those who are called according to his purpose. And his purpose is to reveal himself. And that means he can take the worst circumstances of our lives and use it to demonstrate his goodness and his love to others who are in circumstances who see no way out of it. Right. Okay. Each one of us will experience our own darkest hours. We will all experience moments where we feel there is no hope. We all have gone through it. We will all go through it. But to have community is too light of a word, but to have family who has gone through it that demonstrates God can changes us, because it is him shining through them, demonstrating that circumstances are not dire. So, we are not to compare ourselves to what Paul was, to say, oh, I need to do what Paul did. No. We need to have contact with God. And he is an individual God. He will meet us where we are, and he will change each one of us where we are needed to be changed to come into the fullness of his glory to demonstrate his fruit. And what that means is what he's working on in you, in me, might be different things, but it is all to the purpose of demonstrating him. And that's not to brag about what we've done, but it is to brag about what he has done and is continuing to do in our lives. So I wanted to be quite clear. I'm not talking about Saul, so that's, nope, you need to scratch everything in your life and you need to go back and do what Saul did. Not all of us, or I would say, dare say, any of us are called to be Paul. I, for one, am extremely grateful because I hesitate to say this, but if you're going to make me a martyr, please do it quick, and please make it work the first time. I have no interest in being stoned. I have no interest in being dragged out. If you're going to do it, make it quick. So, with all that said, let's look at the other two texts that I wanted to look at this morning. The first is Acts 26, 1 through 7, and this is Paul talking to King Agrippa. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be an expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews. Wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most strictest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. And we will look at Philippians 3, which we know here, we have heard quite often, and we will hear again this morning. But I'm going to jump right to verses 4 through 6. And to set the background, there were those who came into the church at Philippi, and they wanted to say, if you are going to be a Christian Gentiles, then you need to obey all the law of Israel. You need to do everything that is required in the Old Covenant, and they referred to those people as Judaizers. So if you hear me use that phrase, that means they wanted to make everyone under the law. In Philippians 3, 4 through 6 is Paul's response to this. It says, Though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any man thinketh that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Let me rephrase it. If you think that your flesh has met all the works that are possible, let me tell you, I am the benchmark of what human works is. I am the best there is. I am the best there was. I float like a butterfly. I sting like a bee. There's no one as good as me. And again, we could say, wow, he's really bragging here. No, he's saying is, and we'll get to it, there's a standard that I have set in my own life, and even that standard has fallen so far short, it is worthless. It says, circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, of Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. And again, I bring up, this is the time of his life, as this is one of the prison epistles. And so this isn't a young man bragging about what he is or unsure about the analyzation of what he did when he was young. I can say the older I get, the more I analyze the stupid things that I have done. And I can tell you no more so than when I wake up in the morning and I start stretching to work out the cricks and kinks, and I sound like tinfoil now. And I remember, oh yeah, that's the time you did this, and that's the time, and you're like, wow, if I could take back that stupid action, then maybe my ankle wouldn't hurt so bad after the first 5 steps. And we have a habit of looking back upon all of our life and saying, what are the actions that led to this? And we analyze it and analyze and analyze it. And Paul, at this point, let's say he's 20 when he's converted. He's now in his 50s, 60s. He's older. He's had time to think about it. And so when he says, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless, it is not a throwaway judgment on his part. He's saying, everything that I have done, I have met the qualifications of the law, and I have met everything that is required. And that is a bold statement, being that he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, meaning he was of the sect that was super strict to make sure that you adhered to the law, that you knew it inside and out, black and white, there was no gray area. He lived within that, and to make the statement, I am blameless, that's why he is a benchmark. Because I've already done it all. And when we look back, we'd say, oh, I don't understand the law and declared, I am blameless. That is a statement we gloss over and realize the boldness of that claim. And so I have a list of 12 items of Saul that we will look at from these verses and from various others. And there will be a lot of verses today, so if you want the verses afterwards, let me know. I'll make them available. But his first is he's born in Tarsus in Cilicia. And this is from Acts 22:3. I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Sicilia. Now, Tarsus was a free city. Now, that's unusual in Rome. And the reason it's a free city is there was a civil war in Rome, in Rome, in the whole country, and they sided with Caesar. Caesar won, and as a reward, you're a free city. What's that mean? That means you can govern yourselves as long as you recognize I'm still number one. You can do whatever you want. You're free. That means you don't have to pay tribute to me. It's my reward that you picked the right side. Also, it had a university. And we go, yeah, we got one too. We have the University of Enfield that you can go to. We have a bunch of community colleges. That's not what it was. Universities were not popular. They were very unique places of learning that were organized in that capacity, were very unique. While you might go to the synagogue and learn, that kind of advanced learning was very specialized. And that was also the center of Hellenistic philosophy. Now, there's a bunch of different philosophies. I'm not a philosophy major, so I've done my best to sum it up as blue-collar as I can. How to live a good life. That's the philosophy of time. What do I have to do to appease myself and live a good life? Sounds good to me. The problem is man's idea of a good life is not the same good as declared by our Creator. And so there is a conflict between that thinking and the thinking of what is right. But it was the center of it. And because it had the university, it was a pinnacle of learning. And if you were to compare it, if you've gone through any world history, Athens and Greece, all the philosophers would congregate there. It was a city of learning, and they would have discussions. Same thing with Alexandria, set up by Alexander the Great in Egypt. And so you had your third of a triangle of these major universities. And if you're looking for it, it's in modern-day Turkey. It's above Cyprus. It's 6 miles off the Mediterranean Sea. Why is any of that important? Because the culture and area that he grew up in would have influenced his early life and his thinking. Now, to digress a little bit, and I know there's a lot of historical stuff that we're discussing, and I might be going, well, this isn't a history class. Well, we need to understand the history and the times of what we are studying to understand the impact and effects that it has upon Scripture and to clearly understand it. The kingdom of northern Israel falls. Judah falls. They're under Assyria. They go back and build the temple. Within 100 years, Israel's doing their own thing, and you have 400 years of silence, where there is histories written, but they're not included in the Bible. And as this happens, the nation has been conquered many times, and so you have a spread out of the Jewish people. I believe at one point during this time, they said the Jewish-Egyptian culture was over 1 million people just in Egypt that were from Israel. And so at this point, they are spread out of their land, but they end up diversifying in other areas. Well, the problem is when you go into other areas, you tend to pick up what area that you're in. Or you should, if you're a melting pot. Like if you come here, and I'm not trying to get political, but you give up part of yourself to take on the identity of the area that you're a part of. The problem is when you do that, you might take on the gods of the other areas. You might take on the religion of the other areas, and you no longer keep yourself separated. Those have an impact. And so he grew up with an understanding in a land that was cultured. I'm going to use an unfair stereotype here, and I don't mean it, but I bring it because it brings it a understanding. If you grow up in a city, you think you're super smart because you're in a city. If you're in New York City, you might have an expanded palate because you can go get any type of food at any time of day. But you might consider yourself more educated than someone who grows up in the bayou in Louisiana who enjoys gators. You might think yourself smarter because you grew up surrounded by other things. And you immediately discount other people. I'm not saying that that was the case here, but Paul grew up with more around him, more opportunities, and I do think personally, so this is my thing, growing up in that allowed him to understand and to reach the Gentiles better because he grew up understanding what they thought, how they communicated, what their background was. When I did HVAC, I would listen to ESPN in the morning on the radio going into work. My dad was a huge sports guy. I follow along if my favorite team is in a big game because it's fun to get together and I love pizza and wings. Other than that, I'll say early childhood was I followed the Red Sox. It was wonderful until the All-Star break, and then it was just heartbreak for the rest of the year. So quickly gave up on that. Again, so I'm listening to the radio. I don't care. But as someone going into multiple people's homes, there's enough people that cared about sports that I at least had some way of conversation so when I went into the door, I could greet people and have a conversation about what did they do to get it rolling so they felt comfortable allowing a bald 6'2" guy come into their house with a bunch of tools and say, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this guy coming in. And I've had many calls that are like, does this guy actually work for you or did he steal a van? It's like, do you think there was another guy wearing that size shirt that he was able to steal it from? You can let him in. But the quickest way to make people comfortable was to have various background of different things that you could discuss with them. People like talking about themselves, so if you have some kind of connection, you can talk to them. So that was one of the things that I would do, is I understood enough of a background to have a comfortable conversation with them to make it known that I am friendly and I want to converse. What do we all talk about? Weather. Boy, it's hot out there. Sure is. Have a great day. You too. Why? Because it's a background. And I know I sound like I'm prattling on, but that was the background that Paul grew up in, so it gave him a basis of understanding so that he could communicate with those in their way of thinking, using their language so he could make it crystal clear what their thinking was separate from what God has revealed, and so that the language wasn't manipulated so that understanding was false. There's a problem we have today is we need to be very concise with our language about who our God is. We cannot take the language of others and wrap it around us to communicate. We need to be able to communicate truth in such a way that it is crystal clear what we are talking about. So I think, all said and done, Paul, being in Tarsus, had a background education that allowed him to communicate with others because he knew what they were speaking and thinking. Second claim, he goes, I am Jewish, which means I am of the chosen people, I am of his people. And we see that in Acts 22:3, I am verily a man, which am a Jew. Philippians 3:5, of the stock of Israel. And of Acts 26:4, which was at the first mine own nation at Jerusalem. That was the second thing we know about Saul. Circumcised the 8th day. Philippians 3:5, circumcised the 8th day. Great, congratulations. We overlooked that because, again, we don't have that cultural norm. Genesis 17:7-12 says, And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generation for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee, And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore thou and thy seed after thee and their generations. This is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger which is not of thy seed. And then in Leviticus 12, 1 through 3, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. According to the days of the separation for infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Why is it an important declaration by Saul? He's saying, I wasn't just born of it. I wasn't just a Jew in a foreign land, but I am a partaker of the covenant and the promise that was given to Abraham on the 8th day. On the day that is required from the time of my birth, I have been separated, I have been chosen, and I did it according to the law. Even when I couldn't make the choice, my parents set a firm foundation and established me in my steps how I should go. It's not a throwaway line. It's not saying I'm just a part. It's saying I am part of the covenant. I have taken hold. I am of his people. There is no difference between me and you. I've been in this since day one. For you younger crowd, I'm an OG. Of the tribe of Benjamin. To this day, being part of the tribe of Benjamin is a big deal. I was talking to someone, and both he and his wife were Jewish, and I forget what tribe he was, because he said it didn't really matter. He goes, but his wife was of the tribe of Benjamin, and he wished that he could adopt being into her tribe instead of the other way around because of the esteem to this day of being of the tribe of Benjamin. 3 things about that. The first king was Saul. The reference is Philippians 3:5, where he says, of the tribe of Benjamin. First king, 1 Samuel 9, 1 and 2. Now there was a man of Benjamin, which means of his tribe, whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a choice young man and a goodly. There was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. It didn't matter that Saul and his family were no longer kings, but they were of the first kings. And they remained true to the nation of Judah. You know, when we hear, can anything good come out of Samaria? Nazareth. But the Samaritan woman, how she wasn't favored. You know what happened in northern Israel was 10 tribes that broke off from the true king. And then when they fell many years before, they sent people to live inside northern Israel, and they intermarried, so they were no longer pure. How dare those 10 break off from the original 2, Judah and Benjamin? The other 10 dispersed. The Levites did come back because Jerusalem, which is the third point, is in the land of Benjamin. And we can see that in Joshua 18:28. And Zelah, Aleph, and Jebusai, which is Jerusalem, Gibeath and Kirjath, 14 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the children of Benjamin according to their families. And the reference to the remaining true to Judah was 1 Kings 12:21. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors to fight against the house of Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. We have the first king. We remain true to Judah. We are the only other tribe that remain true to the king. in his lineage. The rest of you 10 are traitors. Not my opinion, but that was the thinking, is if you weren't Judah, you weren't Benjamin, or you weren't of the Levites that returned, you were turncoats. Being of the tribe of Benjamin is a big deal. Hebrew of the Hebrews. I'm the best there is. In other words, if there was a qualification to be a Hebrew, I've met all of them, and you would put me on the top 10 list. And that was Philippians 3:5. But also, his family maintained their identity while they were in a strange land. If I was Saul pointing fingers, or Paul pointing fingers at this point, I could say is, family's been here, you're not even as good as me. And me acting boastous, that's my personality, but I'm trying to drive home the point by being over the top here, is you were in a land, you didn't live by it. My family was from Tarsus. We lived outside of Israel, and yet we've met every single requirement of the law. These are not light claims that he makes. We see a paragraph, but we don't always understand the full depth of it. And this isn't just a, hey, I'm really good. When you start reading through what the resume actually means, you're like, that's actually very impressive. Educated in Jerusalem, I learned firsthand and directly. I didn't take remote classes. I was there learning where I needed to learn. I was willing to uproot from where I was to come to the center of where learning is and be here and learn directly in Jerusalem. Acts 26:4 and 26:5. My manner of life from my youth, which was at first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, known all the Jews, which knew me from beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. Next claim, he learned at the feet of Gamaliel, Acts 22:3, yet brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. Now, there's 3 general stages of learning that I want to discuss. Early learning, from ages 5 to 10, would be in your local synagogue, memorizing the Torah. And once you got through that, you would move to intermediate, most ages 10 to 14, learning all scriptures, but learning how to ask questions, learn how to answer questions, learn the tough sayings. Notice that it wasn't questions first, it was get in and know him and spend time in his word, in the Torah, the foundation, the 5 things that said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, this is what you shall teach to them, and they shall know. And then once they know that, then we will expand upon it, and then we'll get their learning. And then after that was advanced or discipleship, mid-teen to adults. They would seek a rabbi to become a Talmud or a disciple. Now, it wasn't just, I really like learning, so I'm going to spend 10 years at a college to become a PhD so that I can teach others. Now, I'm not against that. If you want to teach and that's why you get a PhD, great. But when you wanted to be a disciple of someone, the expectation was that you spent time learning so that you could do. You weren't just rated on your ability to learn, but it was your ability to apply, your ability to make the understanding and learning fruitful. And it wasn't the student's choice. That's a key thing here. It's not the student's choice. It is the teacher's choice, whether or not they're going to take on the student. And when you have a limited university, like you would back in the day, you would have many people apply to learn from you. Gamaliel, call him Gam, he was a doctor of the law. He understood it inside and out. It was recognized. Do you not think there was multiple people trying to learn from the best? Like, if I want to go and do marine biology, I'm not going to Ohio State University where there's no marine biology stuff. And sorry, Ohio State, I don't know if you have marine biology. I was just trying to think of, pretty well landlocked with limited applications to the sea. I'm going to go to some place on the coast. I might go to an island. I'm going to look for the best school, and that's where I'm going to try and get into because I have the highest chance of getting a best education. I want to go to the best of the best to learn this. That's where Gamaliel was. It was the best of the best to learn from. And so when he says, I learned from him, that means the best of the best selected me to learn because the expectation was that I was a learner and that I would be a doer. And I learned Jewish law and excelled. I learned Jewish custom and excelled. Because it says, as touching the law of the Pharisees, a Pharisee. Philippians 3:5, as touching the law, a Pharisee. Acts 23:6. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, of the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am called in question. Acts 26:5, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of religion, I lived a Pharisee. He didn't just learn, there was an application in his life that he was considered a Pharisee of the Pharisees. And again, the Pharisees were the ones that said we are going to maintain and keep every aspect of the law. And part of the reason that developed is because their culture started taking on every other culture instead of maintaining the identity that was established to them by God by saying, I want you to have relationship with me, and having relationship with me, the law is show you where you are short so that you come to me. Instead, the Pharisees take the law and say, we can earn it by works. We can do everything necessary to earn it. And as we have in his own words, he was blameless. Zeal. I wish we would all have the zeal of Paul. Philippians 3:6, concerning zeal, persecuting the church. That isn't just him saying, yes, I was the one who persecuted, but that is demonstrating that I have sold out so completely to the law, there is no room for those to say that the law no longer needs to be followed because there is something different. It is contrary to the law and needs to be wiped out. There is today, and there has been throughout history, where the zeal of Christians turns into, instead of telling who God is, the murder and crucifixion of those who don't believe what they think. And Acts 22:4, and I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. That's not Paul bragging. And we can say that because when we look through Romans, he talks about the debt that he has to tell others. And to think that this didn't weigh on his mind every single day, I would say baloney. Stupid things that I have done weigh on my mind. Stupid things that I have said have weighed on my mind for many years. To think that he didn't wake up every single day thinking about what I was would be foolishness. This is not bragging. this is saying is, I was so completely sold out that I understand where you are in persecuting me because I was exactly where you were. I was sold out to the law and zeal, and I did the same thing that you're doing now, persecuting me. I was in those shoes, willing to do whatever was necessary to preserve the sanctity of the law, because the foolhardiness is, it's up to us to defend God's law. God's not big enough to do it, so it's up to me. Acts 22, 19 and 20. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believe on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. I agreed with the death of Stephen. Notice there is no defense that Paul offers. He doesn't say, I wasn't guilty. He makes no excuses for what he did. He lays out the facts. This is where I was. This is where my thinking was. This is what I did. I am guilty. That only comes from those who have seen him and have matured in him. And I think that's why we see it in the letters, in the history of Paul, when he is old, because he has gone through the experiences and realized it is only by the grace of God that he can say, I am guilty, but because of his blood, he says, not guilty. You don't say that unless you understand him. I still think of excuses for things that I have done, knowing that it's his grace. Acts 26, 10 to 11. Which things I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. And when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them, and I punished them in every synagogue, and compelled them to blaspheme. And being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto strange cities. The thinking of Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:9. For I am the least of the apostles, that am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. Don't tell me that wasn't here. Galatians 1:13 to 14. For ye have heard of my conversation in time past in the Jews' religion, how that beyond measure I persecuted the church of God and wasted it, and profited in the Jews' religion above many my equals in mine own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers. 1 Timothy 1:13, who was before a blasphemer. He adds that to his list of things that he once was. I was a blasphemer, speaking evil, slanderous, reproaching, riling, abusive, and a persecutor, and injurious. But I obtained mercy because I did it ignorantly in unbelief. Acts 8, 1 through 4. And Saul was consenting unto his death, and he's talking about Stephen. At the time there was great persecution against the church was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house, and hailing men and women committed them into prison. Therefore they were scattered abroad, went everywhere preaching the word. And despite all this, and the persecution, which is not a good thing, was it not used for the glory of the kingdom? would that church in Jerusalem have spread if not for persecution? It might not have, or it might have spread, but I can tell you the mass exodus made it a lot quicker, which means it reached people before their end was reached, before the word got to them. And there's many lessons that we have gone over, and I've tried not to deviate into them, but this one, I'm just going to say it quickly here, is we cannot wait for persecution to spread his word, because if that is what it's going to take, then guess what's going to come our way in greater number? We have been given the charge to spread the gospel of who Jesus Christ is. The Lord Jesus Christ will provide whatever is necessary for his work to get done, even if that is providing persecution. Because he can still keep us through all of it. But he will provide whatever is necessary, even when it is uncomfortable for us. He provides what is necessary. And I know we will talk about Paul in the next coming weeks, and we'll talk about Stephen, and we'll get into greater details of that. But I do not want to leave it at this, because Wes, we have looked at the history, we have looked at God, but I want to take some time real quick here, and I know we're running short on time. But Philippians 3:7 starts with but. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. When I consider my righteousness, there is no comparison to what is revealed through him. Yea, doubtless I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord. Was it the blessings? Was it what God gave me? Was it the deliverance that he provided? No. It was all counted as loss for the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I might win Christ. What I have built is an empire of garbage to never return to. We can cast things aside, but unless we get the mindset that that is garbage, we will return to it like a dog to vomit. Our mindset has to say, that is garbage. There is no point of that in my life. I don't know about you, but I don't have any garbage on my person right now. When I see a trash can, I want to get rid of it as quickly as I can. I'm probably a little OCD on that. But if you look in my car, I don't even like having a straw wrapper more than the trip. My car is pretty empty. That's stuff that I don't need to take and hinder my life. That kind of mindset is what we need to have, is those things that we built up as our own righteousness, our own works, that is garbage. And I know the word's not garbage here, but we're being polite. It's garbage, that I might win Christ. He is not a carnival. He's not a carnival prize. You don't have to put the ring on the bottle 3 times and then, you get large salvation or extra mercy. That's not what he's talking about here. It's defined in the very next verse, to win Christ and be found in him. What place do I have in the Holy of Holies? Holy and not holy do not mingle. If you were to take something unholy and put it on something prepared as holy, put it in, everything's unholy. But not with him. To be found in him means you were unholy, but my virtue will flow into you so that you can have relationship and be in me. It's not just I'm taking you out of your circumstance and I'm just going to plop you over here from now. It means that you are going to be fundamentally changed so that your existence is compatible with what I require. That is winning Christ. Not having my own righteousness, not having my unholy, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ. And we have looked at it many times. Faith is the knowledge of who he is, but that is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith. There is a better prize than what I used to hold in esteem. Let me tell you, if you want the better prize, you don't get to hold on to what you have established as prizes. It's one or the other. You don't get to take your trophies if you're trying to have him. That I may know him in the power of his resurrection. All this comes after. What's the first thing? That I may know him. And the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable unto his death, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. So the question I have for us this morning is, how do we measure our righteousness? Do we hold ourselves to our own standard and say we are blameless? Is it our righteousness or is it his? What are we measuring ourselves against? How do we measure our righteousness? Pastor, will you pray a closing for us?